Hey, welcome to episode 6, Kim Brewer. It was hard to lock this one down. Also, we have our first sponsor, New Ups, who we had on last week.
Excellent.
Them having their pen product placement there, not cheap for a show like this that has tens of followers. All right, so welcome to the show, Kim. So we're out in Western Mass, so this is still, so people still live out here and everything.
Yes, there is Massachusetts beyond Worcester. We exist.
So yeah, I know what we think Western Mass is Worcester, Framingham, and then I was talking to somebody. Who was I talking to? I don't think it was you. It was somebody this morning about Western Mass. I think it was you, maybe yesterday. And then you were like, Springfield isn't even Western Mass. Like that's really more like Pittsfield. Was the
Berkshires? No, but the Berkshires are out there as well. So that's a whole nother.
Oh, it was one of my clients. Yeah, my clients I had on episode 4. I think it was like I guess they originally are from actual Western Mass. So I don't know how west you go. I guess Albany is where you would draw the line for that. But okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I've always liked talking to you, and I feel like you and I, even though we've never actually directly worked together, even on MGMA, I don't think we ever crossed.
I recruited you.
You got me into that? Thanks a lot. So
you're very social. We were social at a conference, and I said you would be great, and I nominated you to be on the board.
It was one of like the.
It was in Maine. I had just had my baby, and you had just had your second daughter, I think.
Wow! God, what a memory you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that the one that's on? Was it on the cliff?
Sam is that? Yeah.
That was gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
It was terrible for vendors. I remember that one. That was the one where. I think that was the one where Dawn's company, so I don't mean that like we're going to go off here for a second, but Dawn's company, Core, she was at that one. It was a poor setup for like my people, the business people, but she inherited it. It was already booked prior to her getting in there. And she got so much heat and she was just like, this is not my thing. Like, and she was like, she gave all of us, I think, whoever went to that one, big discounts for the next show, which I think was like in New Hampshire, because the thing is like the vendors fund so much of that. Like as much as people complain about having to pay a ticket price as an attendee, the vendors pay like, I mean, I don't know, like I think now it's gone down. I think it's usually around like $1,600 for a booth, but back then it was like $2,500 for a booth, and it was a lot of money. And but I also did not complain about that hotel. Was absolutely gorgeous, which is so important for those conferences. But like that's the cool thing about the MGMA. I feel like I think the thing I liked about it was so informal. Like you can shoot the shit. You don't have to be like these formal business people, because most of the people are like practice managers and office managers who like know the reality of the world and they're not like stuck in these big suits.
And it was nice for me to connect with people from Eastern Mass. So I got to meet people in Boston or people in Rhode Island and compare. We also had a lot of the pediatric practice managers went. So we always had our table. And
there was a big PD, and probably still is, a very strong PD presence there.
That's what I always loved about pediatrics. It's very collegial.
Yeah.
I was friends with all the other practice administrators. We'd constantly call each other or email, what are you doing for this? There's not the same level of competition out here, or at least in pediatrics, it was always very collegial.
Which is really weird because that's not true for all specialties. And you would think that it should be, because the enemies usually are like the regulatory bodies, the payers, and things like that, that just make our jobs so much more difficult. And especially in pediatrics. I mean, there's not a lot of people that get rich in pediatrics. You don't see like all like the Lexuses and like all these like Highline cars for the physicians, even, people.
I was the controller of a large orthopedic group before coming into primary care. So I know firsthand the wage differences.
Right. And ortho was always really good for that. So what got you into the MGMA to start?
So I am a CPA. I worked at a CPA firm for a while, had a couple different jobs, a marketing distribution company, a software company. And I was looking to leave that company. And I saw, I'm dating myself, but in the want ads in the paper that New England Ortho was looking for a controller. So I applied, and when I got there, I just thought it was so fascinating. It was like, what do you mean your charges aren't what people pay you? And what do you mean everybody pays you a different amount? And that was just so fascinating. I had a boss who was an RN and an MBA, brilliant woman, and she was very active in MGMA. And she said, Kim, you need to join MGMA. So within my first couple of months, I was a member of Mass Rhode Island MGMA. And then I met Jill Berger Fiffy, and she's the one who got me on the board.
Oh, I miss her too. They were so, like, those days when I first got in, I think it was like maybe where like all that great crew was really like peaking or something. Like I got in there, like I'll never forget, we had one in New Hampshire at some site where there was like all these huntings and stuff like that.
I got the haunted room.
That was your room?
I got it.
And you had like your fireplace went on out of nowhere at one point?
No, my fireplace did.
It wasn't
maybe
you.
Donna.
No, it wasn't Donna. I think it was Jill.
Yeah.
But I remember, and like they would have the Scotch nights. Like I started getting into Scotch because I had to pretend.
That's Jill Pendleton.
Jill Pendleton, that's who it is. Yeah, another great. Yeah, Jill was. I think I started getting into Scotch because I had to pretend to be an actual business person. So, and I didn't want to play golf because as much as I know so much business happens, and still does, I can't be bothered with how boring that sport is. I mean, I actually have never played. I can play the mini golf. I can play the par 3 stuff. But like the idea of playing for 4 or 5 hours is just mind numbing to me. So the other option is to drink Scotch. So I was just like, I hated it at first, but then once I acquired a taste, then I could pretend to be better than everybody else. Be like, oh, you don't know, that's too peaty. What you need is something down in this area.
That's funny.
But
so that's how I got into MGMA, and she pushed certification and said you should become MGMA certified, certified medical practice executive. So that was a little easier for me because the finance section is one of the big areas people struggle with. And then it was learning the HR and the operations and some regulatory things. And so I got that. This would have been probably, oh my God, 25 years, 15 years, 25 years ago. Oh my God, 2005, 20 years ago. Okay, sorry. I need my adding machine, So I got into MGMA, and that's what met everybody. And I was in ortho for about 5 years. And
how'd you like ortho?
I loved it. I thought it was very interesting. It was interesting to learn where sort of the profits and the little pockets of money are. It was a great group. I think with physical therapy, when I left, it was like 43 providers. They're even bigger now. So it was quite the big organization. I learned everything about, I did not know what a CPT code was, what an EOB was when I walked in that door. And I came out and I left to run a medical practice with, 2 offices and, 8,000 patients. So I was actually approached by a former operations manager at Ortho, had gone to run cardiology up in Northampton. That's more a Cooley Dick centered, whereas Ortho was Bay State, and a lot more. Bay State's the large health system in the area. They're fabulous. And so she was up there in cardiology, and she saw the founding physician at a meeting, and he said, I'm looking for someone to run the practice, and she recommended me. And we were a really good fit. They asked me to stay 4 years, and I stayed 16. So
it's wild too, because I feel like it's so often that can go wrong in that situation when someone comes from out of the industry. And I think it's one of the reasons why we have such C-level, especially CFO, quick turnovers in the Northeast. If you go into like the South, like in Texas, your CFOs are always there for like 10, 15, 20 years. Up here, it's like 2-3 years, I feel like, because often the CFOs are, a lot of them are bounced around. There's like directors of finance and CFOs, and they're not good here, and they get fired, and then somebody else picks them up. It's true. And then you also have a lot of people who come from out of industry. And like how you're saying, you walk into like this, healthcare is not like Target. It's not like someone's buying forks, and then you take it and you scan it and you get paid. The rev cycle process, and I'm going to stop myself quickly because I know I'll go on for 8 hours about this and everyone will fall asleep. But the rev cycle process is a very meticulous process that takes months to capture the reimbursement. And there's a ton left on the table. It is insanely overcomplicated for what it should be. And CFOs massively struggle with things like AR. If you know you're not even going to collect half of what you charge, CFOs are like, what the hell kind of market is this? And it's very hard for them to adjust and understand like the KPIs in healthcare versus any other industry.
Totally.
It's so violently different. And I think that's why like heads roll sometimes so quickly. Because if a CFO is gone after like a year and a half, typically that's about how long it takes to size somebody up that's not doing a really good job or not understanding what they're in. And if you switch from one format, like from a hospital format to even like a different hospital, like an LTAC versus like an acute hospital versus dealing with like a group of like skilled nursing facilities or something like that. I mean, the game changes so much.
Yeah, hospital accounting is very different than practice accounting because practice accounting is cash basis.
Right.
So you don't carry AR on the books.
Yeah.
Whereas the hospital, I believe they do, but I think they lower it to what they think the allowable will be. So it's more accurate. That's what I'd heard. I've never worked in a hospital system.
Yeah, like if you're in community health or any of those like nonprofit systems where they have more like standard deals with the state and the Fed and expected payouts, and no matter what you do, you're going to get paid this amount. Those type of like capitated situations, you can budget that much easier than if you're doing like the fee for service stuff. It's a lot harder to manage expectations with that. So okay, so that's how you get into healthcare. Okay, that was going to be one of my questions, but you just managed that without me realizing it. So now you go from this ortho practice to where?
To Northampton area Pediatrics.
Oh, this is my favorite part. Okay, this is really interesting. So you get in there, and your starting position there is what?
It was a practice administrator.
Okay.
In the end, due to the growth of the practice, became the executive director position.
Yeah, and when you started, how many locations did you have?
We had 2 locations and 8,000 patients and maybe 9 providers. When I left, we were 4 locations, 15,000 patients, and 23 providers. Yeah. So we grew exponentially throughout because there was such a demand and a need.
Right.
For
and what is the? So I'm not really too familiar with the Northampton County. So what is it? More rural based, would you say?
Very, very mixed demographic.
Okay.
Very mixed demographic. Urban Dictionary, Google tofu curtain. There's a tofu curtain is this mountain range. It's sort of an extreme socioeconomic divide.
Okay.
So there's sort of the Springfield, Holyoke area, Chicopee, that's a little more inner city. And for out here, it's a city. And so, and then you have the Northampton area, which is very much earthy, crunchy. And then
like Richie, like, is this like a Hunger Games things where you have the elite? And
like old hippies that
like
probably
Vermont
protested. Yes, very Vermont.
Got it.
Vermont, except in Northampton. So there, Northampton, then there's the hill towns, which is like the foothills of the Berkshires.
Okay.
And that's sort of another demographic, a more farming community. Much more rural. So, we used to laugh. Someone would bring their tractor. They brought their child to our South Deerfield office on a tractor to get a shot because the kid was scared. So like big farm tractor driving down the street. So some kids are in the city and some kids are tending to goats and everything in between. So and then we had an Amherst office right outside of UMass Amherst.
Okay.
So huge professor population coming in and out.
Wow.
They would be living there for a couple of years while they taught. We would see their children. That was a very different demographic because they question the science of everything.
Okay.
So that was a little different. Northampton had a little bit more non-vax population.
Okay.
Amherst was this sort of wanted to talk about the science behind it.
Did you take non-vax patients there?
Yes, we did. We've always taken, there's 2 Western Mass practices, us and PD Associates of Hamden County, that do take non-vaccinated patients because it's just, they thought if you release them out there in the world, for lack of a better term, no one's counseling them. At least every year we were counseling and saying, we recommend this. We know you don't, we're not going to force you, but we just want to remind you. Right. And most of the practices in the area discharge, not necessarily for not getting every single vaccine when you're supposed to. Yeah. They just want to see you chipping away at it, that you at least have your next appointment on the books, or some of them, there's core, like, your MMRs, your, certain were non-negotiable, but maybe not other ones.
The things that you need to get into the school systems typically and things like that. So it's interesting because I feel like a lot of folks who are, especially in healthcare, a lot of doctors are probably have no interest in serving that kind of population because they just find it to be, these folks need to understand, they need to have their kids vaccinated. And this is just like a moral objective as well as like a healthcare and a community objective. And then the way you just painted that was really interesting because it reminds me of how like in episode 2, we had Rich Napolitano on, who does a lot of CHC stuff. And I talked to him about how it was so interesting how they do like the supervised heroin injections and stuff to start a relationship, to establish trust, so that somewhere down the line, maybe they'll take counseling. Somewhere down the line, maybe they'll consider alternatives. And it's like an investment because if you, the relationship with the pediatrician is usually a pretty strong one too. Maybe not as tight as like a counselor is with a patient because you don't have as many touch points, but you do when they're young. You have a lot of touch points actually when they're young. And if people start to trust their nurse practitioner or their doctor, maybe there's an opportunity for them to consider vaccinations, right? So that's kind of like
it's just not, I mean, there's a big health one. I went to a seminar once, not related to the practice, but the person who was speaking on immunization said his struggle was, I feel like a parent is coming to me and saying, I want to keep my kids safe in a car, but I don't want to use a car seat. And I just thought that was a very interesting analogy.
This is an actual thing that happened?
Was a doctor. I went to a seminar in Massachusetts. They have an annual immunization, whatever conference. And I went there, and one of the guys was saying that that's how he felt. I thought that was a really interesting analogy of, I want my kid to be safe in the car, but I don't want to use a car seat. I think it's too controversial. And I think the doctors that I worked for, at least, were very much all about the kids. And so it was very much like, you can be 20 minutes, 30 minutes late, and we're going to see you. The theory is, it's not your child's fault that the parent ran late. It's not the child's fault that they ran out of ADHD meds because the mom didn't call or the dad didn't call to get the refill. So it's you could use that analogy of like, it's not the kid's fault that the parents aren't vaccinating them. It doesn't mean you don't take care of the child. So
excuse me.
It was the same with our particular practice. Was open pre-COVID, was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 8 to 5 Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, 365 days a year.
Wow.
And so because the founding doctors' mantra was, no child should ever go to the emergency room unless they absolutely have to go to the emergency room.
That's an awesome policy, and very responsible one as well. And that's the thing. And that's the thing about pediatrics, is that it's so passion based. Everyone I think that's the other side of the coin. When I say there's not a lot of money in there, people will probably think, well, why the hell would anyone do it? Why wouldn't you go with any other specialty where you can get better pay? Because people love kids, they want to help them out. And like you said, there's so many, abuse victims are sitting in that waiting room, often right next to the person who's abusing them at home. A lot of people who I've worked with in pediatrics have said the worst part about pediatrics is the parents. And
I always used to say to people, like, I want to work in pediatrics, I love kids. I'm like, you don't have to love kids, that's the easy part. You got to be able to deal with the parents.
Kids are the best.
Because the mama bear and papa bear mentality. I mean, you'll do anything to protect or for your child. So
and I mean, and I don't think, believe me, I'm not somebody who thinks that everything that comes out of a doctor's mouth is coming from God. But I look at it the same way as I deal with anyone that's an expert in something. I will probably follow their lead 85 to 90% of the time. Like for my clients with Rev Cycle, I don't expect them to take my advice every time, but they should most of the time take my advice. But at times they're going to know what's better for their practice than me. And there's been a couple times where I knew, I remember with my oldest daughter, once she got diagnosed with Lyme. And then I said, can you run the whole panel? And they were like, well, we don't run the panel here. You can, there's no need. The chances of getting Lyme is like a 1 in 100 chance. The chances of getting Lyme in addition to one of the other 2 or 3 tick-borne illnesses, it becomes astronomical. So I like stats. I like metrics. And if it wasn't my child, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Why waste the time and why poke my kid again? But this is my kid. And I'm like, I really don't give a shit if it's a 1 in a million. I don't want them to potentially get some kind of neurological issue, because I wouldn't drive to Quest and get the arm poked. And it turned out that she did have a second tick-borne illness with that. And the medication I would have had would not have treated that second illness. And it's not that I'm a Nostradamus or have any clinical expertise at all, but it's just the thing that, you don't just blindly follow either. I think you should take a lot of stock in what any clinician says, but at the end of the day, that's your child. And so I can understand why people who are against the vaccinations try to do what they do. And I think after, all the stuff that happened with COVID, I think that's probably made things worse. I think people are less trusting. I saw a post, I don't know where it was. It wasn't Mass Med Society. I can't remember where it was, but somebody tried to make this whole post, and it was a doctor, I think, that made this post, now that I think of it. And he was just insulting people who aren't taking certain vaccinations and stuff like that. And I get the frustration from their side, but I'm like, there has to be, like how you're saying, establishing a connection, meeting them halfway, reaching out, try to understand with compassion where they're coming from. Because if you go into a conversation saying, hey, you're an idiot, you should do this, I don't care if I realize I'm wrong, I'm still going to do it because screw you, right?
Yeah. And they knew how far to push. They didn't push it. Like I said, it's just, let me present the facts. You can say no again, but it's my job to present.
Okay.
And information.
This isn't even the big thing. And I've posted a couple things up on LinkedIn, which I know you're huge on LinkedIn, always on LinkedIn, right? Like everybody else, everybody loves LinkedIn. Anyway, it's actually, I had a thing with Jonas. I had to call Jonas up, and Jonas was like, I don't even know my sign-in credentials, Tim. And I was like, you have to at least accept the role as speaker. Like, no one's going to know that you're even on this thing. But what the hell was my point? LinkedIn. Oh, one of the things I've been pushing has been that Northampton is really a focal point for the entire country with the population density of LGBT.
Yes.
And so you were there during this explosion.
Correct.
You were basically at ground zero.
Correct.
When nobody knew anything about pronouns, singular they. And so I want to shut up for a little bit because I have a tendency to talk, but you're a good talker too. But can you give us just how this came at you? Because I imagine, like everyone else, we were all ignorant to this, coming from where it started, what the hell's this wave is that's coming, how you reacted to it initially, how you maybe made adjustments, how you worked with family members, how you worked with the kids, and maybe even providers and stuff.
Yeah, I think it was, so I joined in 2009. So it was what I would call sort of it felt like a slow progression at the time. It started when I came, I just noticed there were a lot of same-sex parents. And one of the first things, I don't even know if I was there a month or two, I was like, all our intake forms say mom and dad. I mean, should we say parent one, parent two? I think I changed that, just really trying to be respectful of those sorts of things. So it sort of came up in that realm first, or that practice used scribes. So there was someone in the room typing for the physicians, and you would get a lot of here with mom. Well, which mom? You have to be able to write so it had to have the name and just being very respectful of that. And then really, to me, the gender, when it got really big was in January of 2016. I'll never forget the inauguration day of President Trump. The week prior, our phones were off the hook of you will sign this gender change form before he gets president, because then you'll never get it. And that was really, really a lot for us to handle. What we ended up doing was referring them to the specialist clinics, because endo is who sort of treats that and would prescribe hormones. It's technically an endo thing.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes
PD
sense.
endo. So we would say that, if this is the case and you want to proceed with this, you need to be working with your specialist, and the specialist can complete this form.
Wow.
I mean, I had someone walk in and just scream at us, you were anti-trans, you're homophobic, you're this, you're that. And the other thing, it's no, but we were just being bombarded with that. As far as the pronouns go, that was something. So that would have been probably 2016-ish as well. We joined the PPOC through Boston Children's, and we were getting EPIC. And I was very sensitive to that. We have kids there's a marker in the chart for this, and that field did not data migrate over to Epic for me clinical works.
For what?
For
Birth
transgender.
gender versus
Yes.
identify.
So
Okay.
I spent a lot of time with Epic and the PPOC to sort of say like, okay, well, this pronoun appears on this letter and this pronoun appears here, because it was really difficult for the parents wanted the preferred name in the chart, and they wanted all communications to go out under that name. But legally, we have to use the patient's legal name. We have to bill it out under the patient's legal name.
Right.
Contract measures still go
You have
by.
to bill it out under the patient's legal name?
Yes, we
Okay.
did. The health insurance had to match.
Oh, for the health insurance. But like if you were
Correct.
sending a statement to the patient,
Well, Epic's come huge way with
right?
that.
But back
and
then,
how it
well,
could.
this isn't a slam on
Back
Epic.
then, no, it's not an Epic thing. Like back then, if you printed a certain school form, it would say the legal name. But if you printed just a letter saying, "Hey, Johnny was out of school,"
Yeah.
that could be the name they go by.
Right.
So with pronouns, it was getting very confusing. So
I didn't even think of the school systems too, because that's
the
a lot.
school systems is huge. So that's something I saw towards the end too, was people were wanting to, enter the school systems with different names,
Yeah.
from the get-go. So
Sure.
the kids aren't transitioning while they're there. So yeah, no, the schools are definitely involved.
How well? Okay. Like 1,000 questions now. Let's talk about the rejection of LGBT movement, especially the T. I mean, I think like by the time you got there, LGB, no one really cares about. Like in the sense that
You mean like not controversial?
it's not like yeah. When I was growing up, no, I didn't know anyone in my high school was gay.
Oh.
No one talked about it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it because it wasn't like anything important to me, because it wasn't something that was in my life. I didn't have anyone in the LGBT world that was a very close family member, friend, or anything. As soon as I graduated, all these folks that I graduated with started coming out.
Okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense and things like that. But I just ignorantly never thought about it. But by the time you're talking 2009 to 2016, it's not controversial.
No.
Like as far as if someone's gay, lesbian, like there's not, they've made such amazing strides. And I know there's always going to be people who are prejudiced to whatever race and whatever. I mean, people are silly about whatever, but it's really the T that, and still is, I think, is something that a lot of folks are focusing on and struggling with in so many ways, which I find personally fascinating, but I know it can be something that erupts a lot of emotions. So were the schools, how were the schools generally speaking? Were they supportive? Were they allies in that process?
I can't say. I don't really know. All
Okay.
I know is it was more of a legal name form.
So you didn't really get into the trenches with them.
No, I don't know. We had that practice had when I left probably 6 or 7 behavioral health clinicians and 1 or 2 psychiatric nurse practitioners. So that was a huge thing that the PPOC, as Jonas spoke about on one of your other podcasts, that bringing that in-house, making that part of the whole body health really destigmatizes a lot.
I think all that, like, it's so funny because they're just fields on a form, but they were so important because I remember, and I didn't really get, so like my oldest daughter is non-binary.
Okay.
Until then, I still had no one that was like very close to me that was part of the LGBT community. And God, did I learn a lot of things through that process. And it's turned into a lot of very interesting conversations and experiences from that. But like I remember in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001, 2002, when you started seeing the trans movement starting, but I think it really kind of heated up around like that 09, 10, 11, 12. I was concerned because I'm like, people are going into like emergency rooms and they're saying their gender is something that it wasn't at birth, which medically speaking can cause massive, and I was just thinking, you're going to have people losing lives because they're going to say they're female when their birth gender was male. There's going to be a medication that's not appropriate for them, and they're in some urgent situation, and some terrible things are going to happen. And a few things like that did happen. And as simple as adding a data field of birth versus identity is, or making that separation, which I still often, I conflate sex and gender in my head.
Okay.
So like, and I always, it's still, even with having my daughter, and like we have great debates about this stuff, because I look at everything like, I do look at things very binary. I look at like, because I look at it from the scientific point. Like in science, usually what they'll say is for any species, it's not about what you have between your legs. Like with bees, for instance, they call the queen bee the queen bee. It's a queen bee, not a king bee, because that's the one that gives birth to all
Okay.
So in science, it's typically whatever the birth giver is,
Mhm.
that is identified as the female or whatever. So I look at things like that. My daughter will be like, well, it's way more complicated than that. And then they'll say things like, oh, like, look at folks like this, folks who do that. And it's like, yeah, no, I've seen all this type of things that certainly blur the lines. And I honestly don't really care. Is there 50 genders? Is there 2? It doesn't ultimately matter to me. The pronouns don't matter to me, but they do matter to the person.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean? Like if somebody was referring to me as she, her, I would be annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And if I corrected them and they kept on it, I'd get pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was an honest mistake, I'm not going to be a jerk. I'll be like, hey, listen, just so you know, blah, 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 not a big deal. But, and I think that's how most of those conversations should go. But then you have a lot of folks who are very, very much against that stuff. So 8-year-long segue to ask the question, what about parents who were not supportive, or even dicier probably, one parent's supportive, one parent's not?
So that came up. So, you know, one of the struggles in pediatrics that we had is the custody, all things custody, whether it's kids born out of wedlock, divorced parents, DCF custody pulls, you know, in and out of things. There's a lot. That was probably my biggest learning curve in pediatrics. That's the additional factor there. I do know we had a child whose mother said she, girl. The father said he, boy. Biologically, his sex assigned at birth was male. And they had 50-50 custody. And this poor 8-year-old had to dress like a boy and be called he at dad's house. And 50% of the time, mom would dress she in her house.
Wild.
It is. So they ended up having to get a guardian ad litem. And the guardian ad litem, oddly enough, made both moms get a psych eval. Oh, it's actually a 2-mom family, and that one. And they made them both get a psych eval.
The parents?
Yes, because she couldn't figure out like who's lying. Because then in the end, they weren't able. It became down to neither parent could use pronouns. Neither parent. The kid changed his or her name altogether. You know, it just needed. He needed a fresh start. And so I have seen that. That was the extreme example of like literally having this poor 8-year-old live 2 separate lives. But for the most part, I think in our area, most people were supportive. I think there are struggles, but that's sort of between the parents, or you can always have a parent come in and talk to a pediatrician. If anyone, you know, you could go do that with your pediatrician privately without your child, and just really learn more. And there's so many resources online as well.
Yeah.
But that was, but we would have the same thing with vaccines, right? The HPV was a big controversial vaccine when I started.
Right.
I didn't know what thimerosal was until I started. I was like, what's thimerosal?
Yeah.
Because flu shots used to come in 10-dose vials.
Oh, okay.
So a multi-dose vial needs thimerosal.
Yeah.
And so there were just some fascinating things that come up in pediatrics. But
Wow.
custody is a huge one, especially born out of wedlock. Because we used to say we assume joint custody unless otherwise provided by a court.
Okay.
Well, before, if you were born out of wedlock, the only way the father would get custody is if he took mom to court to establish custody.
Okay.
Well, if you never did that, there is no legal document.
Right.
And so it just became a little sticky, or parents would be dating someone. So yes, I want you to have access. We break up. No, he doesn't get access anymore. So the back and forth access. I think the hard part with the transgender is more about getting the EMRs to catch up. So for example, at the end, we had a trans male, so sex assigned at birth female, trans male. He carried the baby, gave birth, and was breastfeeding.
Okay.
The system is not designed, you know, the parent.
The parents are probably rejecting a male that's pregnant.
Well, the Epic didn't have transgender fields for the parents and the contacts. They had it for the child and the patient.
Okay.
But I don't know that they thought through pediatrics, you'd have a guardian.
Right.
And so there was no way to note in the system that, you know, this person is going to present as male, identifies
Right.
as male, you use he pronouns,
Right.
but it is the birth parent who is breastfeeding.
And the thing too is, I think the thing interesting about your experience was you were working without a manual. Like you were the first person that educated me on pronouns. I don't think you may have eventually even done a
I did
MGMA
like
talk.
three or four of them.
Prior to you doing your first one, you chatted with me about it. And I was so excited that you were going to do those talks, because I remember when I talked to you, it was at probably my height of ignorance to all this stuff. And that was like, I want to say like probably right around this time when I started MGMA, which must have been like around 2014.
20, yeah.
Yeah. And you were explaining it to me and I'm like, okay, I guess. And it's so funny because like a lot of things seem silly until they're important to you.
Mhm.
You know, like I could give a damn about soccer. But if all of a sudden my kid wants to play soccer, now, okay, I'm going to eat, breathe, and live soccer. Like, yeah, I'm going to focus in. So like when my daughter all of a sudden, you know, came out as non-binary and they, them are the pronouns, like I was like, okay, like, and I'm a very practical man. I'm like, listen, and like, I will let them know, like, I don't agree that there's, you know, multiple and like, so we have good conversations and I'll say, you know, I'm going to screw this up. Yeah. Like I have never used it. And from their perspective, trans is just like, they were born in 2009. They were born when you started there.
Yeah.
So in their world, trans has always been a thing. Non-binary has always been a thing. And it's weird to me. Like when I tell them that nobody ever came out as gay when I was in high school, they're just like, why? What?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a thing. And I'm like, but it like before. And I was there during the time when, you know, gay folks were able to get their right to even be married. And I told them too. And I was like, I was originally against it. And they were like, no, you're not. And I was like, I was, because I looked at it as like the definition is man and woman and all this other stuff. And then I had a good conversation with one of my friends who I know like often watches these, Steve Ellison. He's not in healthcare at all, but like he and I had this really big heated debate. And like we were probably 18 or something like that around the time. And he was like, it's not about like everything doesn't have to be logically right or wrong, Tim. And I'm like, but this is how it's defined. And he was like, what about like the pursuit of happiness? What about just letting people have the same rights? And I couldn't make sense of that in my head. And I was like, I never considered that. Like these people are going to be goddamn miserable. Yes. Because, and again, it's just like when you're in a place of ignorance, you need to have experiences, especially with folks from those demographics. And I didn't have that. So the next best thing was I had a very close friend of mine who was fiercely advocating for those folks and twisted me around. And I was like, you're right. I was like, who gives a shit? Like, it doesn't bother me. I'm just saying, like, from, you know, if someone wants to say the sky's red and I think the sky's blue, who really cares? Let them get married. And my daughter thought that was really interesting. But like, but then it became like a joke, and it's like we find ways to find humor. Like I'd be like, oh, I can't drink Budweiser anymore, and they were like, why not? It's like, well, Dylan Mulvaney drinks Budweiser, and I hear that that's gonna make me gay or something. Like that's not how it works. And so like, which is super ignorant. I probably shouldn't be putting that on here, but it was just like ways to break down the wall so they felt more confident about coming out, and then like with their little sister too, and so now. It was things where like, and we created these systems where like you would get a point if you misgendered somebody. So if I said she, then if they before I corrected myself, if someone else in the family corrects me, I get a point. So it became a fun game. And if they ever called my truck a car, they would be hit for misgendering my vehicle. And
using it, say someone was to change their name legally, using their original name is called dead naming. Because that name is dead to them, you know? And so that is how I got into all of the webinars and presenting this topic. Was I presented it as, I live in this community, I'm immersed in this community, I needed to educate myself. And so it's something that there aren't webinars about, or people are uncomfortable talking about it. And I remember I did that first session and it was standing room only. We went over and everyone was asking all these questions. And I don't know, maybe it was just the way I presented it. They just felt more comfortable asking me these questions. So I thought that was really very useful. Like I said, I did that at least 3 or 4 different times.
I love that one because there was like another one that was going through a lot that around those times that was how do we deal with the millennials? They're so crazy and
I did that
different.
one too.
You did that? I hated those ones, to be honest with you.
Generational differences in the workplace.
Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I hate stereotyping people by generation. I knew people.
Are you a millennial?
I was born in 96. Yeah. I graduated in 96. I was born in 78.
Okay.
So I'm at like the tail
Oh,
end.
so you're my same.
But like, so for me, I've known so many idiots that have been older than me and so many really responsible people who have been like 20 years old and stuff that I've had as employees that have blown my mind in so many different ways. And I just feel like, I mean, maybe that's how you have to think if you have a group, if you're in a larger business or a medium-sized business, you're like 50 plus employees. Maybe that's the way you have to think. But I've always, like the highest amount of employees I've ever had was 34.
Okay.
So I've always known my employees' names. I've always known, like, you know, if they're married, do they have kids and stuff like that. And that's always been important to me. So I don't know, I would always evaluate them as who they were versus like, so I thought the millennial stuff was, I honestly like never liked those talks, but the gender stuff was like something that no one had a clue about. And it was, and you were like, again, I can't imagine what it was like for you working without a net, like with no manual. And so like, how did you get educated on this stuff? Like, how did you learn?
There was a nurse practitioner, Leah Netsby, at Cooley Dickinson Hospital who would go around, and I watched a seminar on her, and I was like, wow, no one is talking about this. And I mean, she's a nurse practitioner. She doesn't, you know, and I knew I was involved in MGMA and they're always looking for speakers. And I thought, you know what, I'm comfortable discussing this topic and teaching people. And, you know, if I stumble and say the wrong thing, like everybody does or is going to do, then you just correct yourself.
Right. Yeah. And it's all like I think the thing is that, and I know I probably said a lot of ignorant things, but like the job is, the way I look at it is, as long as you're looking to be an ally to the cause, to be supportive and be helpful and not be a bigot for any situation, I think it's really.
That's exactly what I say to my son is we don't choose who we love, and it's none of our business who people love.
Right.
You know, it's what does it matter to you? I mean,
it doesn't. It's the same. Like I'm engaged right now to a woman who's a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm not a believer.
Yeah.
I still respect the hell out of her. And I think she's wrong? Sure. I hope she's not watching right now. But if Jesus comes down tomorrow and is like, I am the way, then I'll be like, okay, I was wrong. Like, do I think I know all the answers to the history of the universe? I don't think I'm that smart. No. So I think it's silly whenever anyone thinks they know the answer, like how many genders there are and all these different things. Like, when does life begin? Is it at conception? Is it like, there's reasons why we always fight about these things because it's not clear answers. We're either not smart enough to know it, or, you know, in a lot of situations, it doesn't really matter, I think. But okay, now let's get to some practical stuff. So you went through 2 EMR changes over there, right?
Two changes. So 3 systems, 2 changes.
3 systems, 2 like integrate. Now,
Conversions.
I've been through several of these, and never from your perspective, always from like, usually I've been the third party where it's like you get the vendor and you have my client, and I always start off with prepping them. Like, if they say it's going to be 3 months, it's going to be 9.
Yeah.
If they say, like, you've got to like dig in, like almost like having a baby, like you've got to dig in, like you're going through boot camp here. You're going to clear a lot more time than you think you're going to clear. Things are going to go terribly wrong. You will lose your mind. You will hate your IT people and stuff like that. And
as much as you hated your old system, all of a sudden the new system, you're going to miss half the stuff from your old system.
It's so weird how that happens. It's so true. And yeah, I mean, like, so we go through probably like a couple of those every year. And so it's so hard for the clients to deal with. But do you have some, you know, for folks who might be watching this that are going through stuff like that now or anticipating that might be coming soon? I want to, like, if you could walk us through what you think are the best lessons learned from your perspective. And then I got a follow-up question.
Yeah, I would say the pre-planning is critical. So form a team, someone from the front desk, someone from billing, someone from clinical, one or two of the providers, and really form a team across the areas of the practice and lay out. Most of the medical records people do have sort of a blueprint of here's the different things and get ready to set up for these things. I looked at it as a huge opportunity to clean up your data. When will you ever not have anything in your in basket?
Yeah.
It's the day you start the new EMR. So this is your chance to kind of clear out the
Right.
backlog, get all those old notes signed, and return those calls and just get that cleared out. Same with AR. It's like, are we going to bring over all this AR
Right.
that's 200 days old, just write it off or send them to collections?
Yeah.
So it was a chance. The one big thing that varied from, actually there was a third, because we took on a practice from Mass General. So we had to take their data in.
Yeah,
to
most
our
of those,
system.
you usually can't bring AR from one system to another.
No, because they were keeping their AR. That was a little different.
Usually that doesn't come over like demos and stuff like that you need to get.
Epic, I believe, did. Medical manager did not go into eClinicalWorks. We ran out medical manager. And then we used Transworld. That's how I tested out Transworld.
Oh, hold on. Charlie Colarulo.
I don't remember the
You don't know
No,
him?
it was a woman.
Oh, okay. Charlie was.
And we gave them all our really old stuff, saying, here, we'll never collect it. But before we wrote it off, and it worked. We got a decent chunk.
Yeah. For
So
that
that was
situation,
one thing.
Transworld works very good. Like, I think.
Not the ongoing as much.
It depends. Like, it depends on the practice. Like, we do a lot of work with First Financial Resource. That's Larry Gordon's company.
Okay.
And I don't think I think he's just kind of, he has some great people who are like running a lot of the show over there now. And they're really good for, especially for smaller practices and mid-sized practices, because they pay their people well. They'll do phone calls. They have really good demeanors on the phone with the patients. And then there's other ones where, like, you have ACA, which is Action Collection Agency. Jay Gonzalez, he's been running that since before I was in the. God, how old is Jay? I saw Jay just the other day. He looks great too. I got to ask him how he does it. But they're great. Like, they did Steward, and they did they have these big ones, and they can churn out massive stuff. That's all going to be, if you're going to have a one size fits all, that's fine. But if you want that really good patient experience, I think Larry's pretty good. Transworld had a really good option for larger clients too, or especially like clear outs like that, like old.
Yeah, I think the clear outs were good. We used them for some years and then we stopped using them.
Yeah.
But I agree with the smaller practices. It's just gets you more touch points. They send a lot of letters. Every letter is a different size and different envelope with different font to try to keep getting people's attention. So, we did have some luck with them. But so the biggest thing that varied between conversions was how much data came over from like a demographics perspective.
Okay.
And so one of the big things from eClinicalWorks to Epic was family history. It did not come over well, because it's not like my medical history is this. It's, my child, and here's mom's, and here's maternal grandmother, paternal grandmother. So a lot of those fields, if it wasn't necessarily structured data to structured data, anything free text doesn't really come up. So one of the things, or certain areas of the problem list, like assessment notes may come over, but this other section doesn't. So learning what comes over and what doesn't. And then if the free text field doesn't come over for the 3-4 months leading into it, try to train the providers. Okay, you need to move that to this field, because otherwise it's not going to come over.
That's brutal.
The good thing is the mass immunization registry, right? So you can at least pull that.
Re-pull it,
with the hospital systems, like say someone used Bay State a lot, the Mass Highway, and you can ping them, you can get a problem list, allergies, meds, that sort of thing. So you're not flying blind per se, but there can be things lost in translation. So keeping your old one accessible for some time is important. Also, depending on the migration, some companies only brought in 7 years worth of notes, where some of them brought in a lot more. eClinical brought in a lot more from the prior system than Epic did, because it's sort of a lot of data to manage.
Yeah.
So then you also get into like, okay, when a kid's medical records are needed for disability, they want records back to date of birth. Kid goes to try to join the military, they're going to want records back to date of birth. It's just something they can ask for, depending on what the illness is and when they, it started. So you have to have access to it. So in peds, it's 7 years, but after they turn 18 or their last year they were seen.
Oh, that you have to hold on to the records.
So if they were last seen as a 3-year-old, you still hold it 7 years after they turn 18. So you're holding. The clock doesn't start till they're 18.
Oh, interesting. I never knew that. That's funny. But I would just think if someone's needs assistance, it's what their diagnosis is now that's much more important, not the history of it.
The other big thing that worked well is to have a control room, was what we called it. So on the first 3 days of go live, I set up in a conference room. I had paper all over the walls, and people would come to me and say, hey, this isn't working. And I'd be like, okay, yep, I know about that. We've already logged a ticket. Or, oh, I don't know about that. Show me your screen. And I was logging the tickets and taking the calls so that
I could still picture you having a wallpaper of just your paper notes over there and stuff like that. See, I called them out. You didn't want me to get the digit. Okay, so I know to Epic. I want to talk about that in a minute, but going to Epic, I know wasn't really so much of a choice. Was going to ECW a choice of you guys? So you guys wanted to go to ECW because you anticipated certain gains, or you had certain frustrations?
Yeah, I mean, we were on shift F7 to print escape to get out. I mean, that was med manager back then. And so we had medical manager for the billing and the appointments. We had this software called Encounter Pro for the medical record side, and no one's ever heard of it. It wasn't keeping up with meaningful use, any of that.
Right.
And so it was heading towards meaningful use that we really started looking. So 2010, we knew it was coming. So eClinical Works was a low cost product that,
They were low cost?
I would consider them low cost against an Athena. Yeah.
Oh, well.
I don't know what else to compare it to.
Yeah.
But it was pretty low cost at the time.
Yeah.
And they had a pretty robust system.
They had a big issue, I think. But didn't they have a big issue with meaningful use or something? There was some
I don't know.
Big lawsuit where they had to let people out of contracts. I can't remember the detail. Yeah, there was a big issue with them somewhere in the in the teens, in the 2010s. I think later, 2017.
We were off
Maybe
by
right
then
after you got out.
because two of the big things with them, with the PD, the struggle in pediatrics is, they're not just little adults. There's different data elements that need to be captured. And so, shoot, I lost it.
We can go back.
Go.
I'm good for more. I got, so I know Leah might be watching here, so just keep that in mind for your answer to this one. When you had to switch to Epic. So this is something that was, so just for the folks who don't know this, because I know there's a lot of folks out of the industry that watch this. The PPOC is a group that manages the affiliated practices in Massachusetts with Boston Children's Hospital. That was pretty good.
IPA,
Yeah. They're basically
it's all pediatric primary care, all privately owned.
Okay. Now, at some point, they forced all the practices that were affiliated with them to convert to Epic, which I imagine was so I understand why. Yeah. It's whether it's consolidating metrics, data to be able to better provide their services and to better assist their practices. Having 1,500 different EMRs is a problem. And they had I think around that time, upper 80s or mid 90s of practices at that time. So, but from the practice level, it has to be an extremely difficult situation, kind of like how we were saying earlier. I love pizza, but if someone's trying to stuff pizza down my throat, I'm going to tell them to get away from me. So it's, and not every EMR works for every practice. So I imagine it was frustrating in the beginning. I'm sure the folks over there are plenty good to work with, but can you explain what that's like when you're not choosing your EMR, or your EMR is being kind of shoved down?
Well, it actually reminded me of what I forgot I was going to say. What I was going to say is one of the benefits of Epic was it was more pediatric specific because it was the PPOC with the backing of Boston Children's. They were able to work with them and get a lot more pediatric functionality built in. So for example, in eClinical Works, back in 2015, the immunization schedule, what they suggested the kids should get for vaccine schedules was off. If a child got off schedule, eClinical Works back then was not good with calculating that. The other thing eClinical Works was not as good at was calculating medication, the weight-based when you're a little baby, based on the weight is the dosing. That never quite worked out well for pediatrics. The blood pressure ranges for kids are different. That never quite worked out in pediatrics. So I think that was such a huge benefit to go to Epic. That was the selling point of what made it more palatable.
That's great.
And the support. I mean, they were the ones doing all these classes, and we had, all of that training and a help desk to call. So we weren't on our own. Whereas when we went to eClinical Works, it was me. I was the help desk.
Really?
So it's the support. You pay for the support, but it's huge support. And
yeah,
pediatric
and support can get
focused.
very costly, especially if you deal with like systems that are out of state and things like that. They
Yeah.
have to fly people in, and
The hardest part was not having control of things. So in eClinicalWorks, I want a new appointment type. I write a new appointment type. I want to
Okay.
change this. I remember pre-COVID, they'd probably laugh now, but pre-COVID, I fought to get a virtual visit med check appointment type. They had sick and they had well. An ADHD med check is not sick. And if your measures are,
Right.
you're seeing these kids for follow-up, now you're not capturing anyone, because if you're running it based on show me all kids who had a med check,
Right.
you need med check and virtual visit
Right,
med
sure.
check. They wouldn't, it took me a long time, but they finally did it, just, but it was
Like, I feel like a
those
lot of that
little
stuff should just be
things.
like, you should be able to just have blank templates, because God knows what your practice does that's different than other
Yeah.
practices. Because even in PD, you could have, like, what if you wanted to have an allergy clinic? Like they
We
have,
did amoxicillin challenge.
you did?
Yeah, no one was allergic to amoxicillin that we
Why are you
tested.
yelling at me?
I'm not. I'm just saying it was exciting.
So, well, here's my question. So I don't know what the timing is for appointments for folks that are doing something like that.
Yeah.
But let's say it was different than the amount of time that you book people for an initial visit or a follow-up visit or a med check.
Mhm.
Like, wouldn't that be cool if the system just has a blank template where you can say, hey, I'm going to call this allergy, initial visit, allergy follow-up, and just set my own times and just.
Yeah,
Like,
you can do, there was template flexibility. It was more
Okay.
certain little things like what you call an appointment,
Right.
because again, they're supporting how many people.
Right.
They can't take everyone's little individual requests and just update the system
Yeah.
for it. So
How was it dealing with Leah? She was terrible
I
at
love
first, right?
Leah.
You love
No,
Leah.
hi Leah, love you.
Everybody loves Leah. All right. Cool. So I have no
But-
idea where we at with that. We're already at noon. I knew this was going to happen because I was telling, what's funny? My fiance actually told me, I must have been talking to her about you at some point, and she was like, she was the one who told me, like, you got to get Kim on the show. So she was really excited. So I don't know if she's watching now. She's probably working, but we'll probably watch it tonight. But I knew that this was going to fly by. This reminded, like, when I did my first episode with Rosemary Spada, she, the first time I looked was the same thing. It was like noon when I looked at the time for the first time. So as we're getting later in the time, I want to make sure there's a couple things that I hit. Well, I guess let's close this piece out. Can you candidly talk about what it was like to have a relationship with the PPOC from the practice level, like the support they provided to you, and how that relationship actually worked?
The PPOC is amazing. They're, like I said, it's pediatric, primary care only, privately owned. So there's just so many similarities. What I liked about them was they didn't shove the pizza down your throat. They'd say, here are the pizzas. This pizza is best practice. You are welcome to choose any of the pizzas, but this is the best practice pizza. And
Right.
it wasn't, you have to do this,
That's
you
very
have
true.
to do that. So that was really good. The other thing was, when we were in a different hospital systems, PHO, we happen to be linked with Cooley, all of the focus is on adult measures. What are the A1Cs, the readmits, the infections? Pediatrics was just an afterthought,
Yeah.
So being able to move to a network that only focuses on pediatrics and understands that is huge.
Yeah.
All of the measures are only pediatric measures, all of the educational sessions. So they just
Right.
offer so much. I used to say it's more work for the practice, in my opinion. There's more meetings and more requirements, but the education that they provide. And
You have no excuse if you're working with it. Yeah, and I feel like with so many vendors, they're not super focused on, like, they might be PCP focused or something, but they don't really know, like in PD, that you need to have, once a child hits 13 or 14, they should have their own
the
portal to
teenage
be able to go.
drivers. Yeah.
Things like that. There's a lot, or like how you were talking about dosage based on weight and age and stuff like that. They're going to fumble those things. And it's great to have someone so focused on that. It's funny because I remember once I had an issue with Jonas, and I was like, I hate how, like, you're supposed to be bringing in behavioral med to all these places. Like, I have the balls to say this when this guy saved the world. Like, I really think he should have a cape on his back. But I was just like, I pointed out, I was like, these practices, I was like, they're doing like these Band-Aid effects. They're getting them these basic things. They're then turning them on to another psychotherapist. Like, it's hard enough for these kids to latch on to one. Never mind, then expect like 3 months down the line to switch over. And he was like, Tim, I agree with what you're saying. My job is, like, it's like what you're saying with the pizza. Like, here's what I'm telling you should do. Here's what I advise you to do. Here are different options that you can have. which overall is great, as long as it's nothing that's hurting anybody. And it wasn't anything that was hurting. I mean, we were dealing with wait times of like 14 months in those days for someone to just get a counseling appointment. And I was happy to hear that, because I was super upset about like when I saw a couple of the practices, and I'm like, this is like a checkbox system. I mean, like, yeah, technically it's integrated, but it's not comprehensive. It's not really patient focused. And no, Jonas is very much like very focused on getting things done, and a very,
it's a short-term model. Their model of behavioral health is a short-term model. It's not meant to have a long-term therapeutic relationship, because you'd clog the system. That's not what it's meant for.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. Now, why'd you get out?
Healthcare is interesting. I fought the fight for so many years. I was one that thought I was going to change it. You know,
you don't think you changed anything?
I don't know. I tried to, we'd bill CPT codes that we knew they weren't going to pay, because if no one bills these CPT codes, the insurance companies aren't going to know we use them and even think to reimburse us for them. And so just thinking I could change X, Y, and Z, I think it got tiring. It's also, private practices is a tough gig.
It's very tough.
I can't speak to the adult side, but I know in pediatrics, we would get yelled at all day, every day. It got to the point that a couple months ago, they had to add all calls are recorded now, because it got that bad. I mean, people just scream at you. We had someone throw snowballs at our waiting room window because we wouldn't talk to her during COVID, because she had COVID and she wouldn't wear a mask. And we said, please go outside and call us from the parking lot. So she went outside and she decided she was going to throw snowballs at the waiting room window, while her 5-year-old said, mommy, stop, mommy, stop. So, it's dealing with the explosiveness of the situation. It's the demands when you're out of appointments, and my kid needs to be seen now. I mean, you're not going to take a 6-month-old to an urgent care. Urgent cares, most of them won't see under 18 months. So it's that balance of sick versus well versus, preventative med checks, all of that. The anxiety and depression and eating disorders that came out of COVID were huge. The old practice hired an eating disorder therapist, just doing eating disorders. But I think it was time for me to move on. And I kept saying, I just want to go back to being an accountant. I just want to go back to being an accountant. I thought, when you don't run a place and you're like, well, if I ran this place, I would do X, Y, and Z. And then, so when I got this job, it's like, I'm going to run this place and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I did more than all of that.
You did. But you're coming off nice to everybody here, but you were ferocious. Like, you were unbelievably passionate. And you didn't take prisoners. Like, you didn't knuckle under. So
no, I'm very blunt.
You're very blunt. Well, that's one of the things I love about you. And I think that, like, I think that if I could ever figure out how to get comments to work here, or anyone who watches this that knows you would want to punch you in the face for saying you didn't affect people. You, like, even just how I gave you like a couple snippets of how you affected me. I mean, even when I was running my PD practice, like, you gave me.
I called you. I called you. I'm like, you need this. You need to get this.
And I was asking you. I was like, can I pay you? You're helping me a lot here.
No, I think I overwhelmed you the first time.
Yeah, you did. Of course you did, because you have this massive wealth of knowledge. You're like, you got to do this. You got to sign up. You got to be part of this association. And I was like, oh. But, that, like, your wealth of knowledge is huge. You've inspired tons of people. You've mentored, I'm sure, countless people. I can confidently say, without even knowing that, I know that you, just from your persona that you have. So I think it's very, very humble for you to say that, but also horribly wrong. And I really hope that some people leave some comments about that, because that's a ridiculous thing to say. I think that, I mean, you probably influenced change in even like the PPOC and folks like that like understand it, because you and other folks like you, and you're not the only person that's blunt like that. Like, coming with that position, there's not a lot of room for like getting all mushy and stuff. You don't have a lot of time for that. So you have to be straightforward, whether it's dealing with vendors or whatever. And, that feedback, a lot of folks find invaluable. So it's not sweet, it's not cushy, it's the truth. And you've never held back on that. I mean, you can do those harsh truths, even with people who you call friends. And when you feel like they need to be put in the place. And I think that's hugely valuable. So I yelled at you when you left healthcare. You remember that? I was just like, no, And you were
It
like,
wasn't a definite, see, practices aren't typically big enough to have an accountant at that level.
yeah,
I had no desire to work at a hospital system, just it's a different beast.
I don't blame you at all for
Um,
that. It is a very different beast, and I don't think
Accounting wise,
you'd be satisfied at a place like that.
I don't have the base to get in at the level I would have needed to get into. But
I also don't think you would deal with the
CPAs are
bullshit
a
there
dying
well.
breed. They've just lowered the requirements for schooling. So,
What do you mean?
when I took the CPA exam back in the day, it was you had to get your bachelor's.
Yeah.
There were 4 parts. You had to take them all at the same time. Then you had to work at a CPA firm for 3 years to be able to call your CPA.
Okay.
So even after I passed the exam, I couldn't say I was a CPA for 3 years.
Right.
Shortly thereafter, probably right around 2000, they made a change where you needed to get how many ever credit hours, which was just a couple classes short of a master's.
Okay.
So you had to get a master's, pass the test, but only had to do 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now what happened is,
Well, I think we actually have a comment, but go ahead.
now what they did was there was like a 30% pass rate. They took the CPA exam, they made it 5 sections, and you can take them one at a time.
Okay.
Still wasn't getting people to go into the field.
Really?
Everybody's retiring. The incoming crop of CPAs aren't there. So they just went back to, you can do the master's in 2 years in public, or you can do the bachelor's in 3 years in public.
And the master's I thought was a three years of master's, right? Oh, no, I'm thinking of lawyers
The
right now.
3rd year.
It's 2 years that you have to have a school.
I think it's
after.
about 1 year.
1 year?
Yeah, I think it's only 1 year, almost 2.
So
not
right now
sure.
we have a shortage of CPAs?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
So Connecticut just changed their laws. It's definitely something that's being talked about in the
And then there's
industry.
continuing education as well
Mhm.
with those folks, right?
So it's just hard because,
Oh, I hope this
You need a
comment is
good
someone correcting you,
accountant.
like I was saying.
okay,
You want
you need to have a good accountant and a CPA. And bookkeepers are not
you know Michael?
passionate. Of course I know Mike. Hi, Mike.
Who's Mike?
Mike is an awesome insurance agent if you ever need health insurance.
Where does he work?
He actually works in the building I showed up to by accident. He works right in Holyoke.
Mike, we almost had it.
I was going to say hi.
What does he say? Okay, let me actually read this. Passion is an understatement when it comes to Kim. Yeah, no shit. She cares so much about everything she does, and I've always admired that about the way she. Yeah, I mean,
Thank you, Mike.
that's how you've always come off to me,
Yeah.
and I think that's awesome that he just wrote that there.
Well, you know what the thing that stuck with me when I was young, Steve Jobs quote, those of us who think we're crazy enough to change the world are probably the ones that will. So it's like you have to be crazy enough to think you're going to change
See,
the
I
world.
don't think you're like a Steve Jobs though, and here's why. There are certain people that like change the world like
Yes.
Steve Jobs and like Elon Musk. People who are so unbelievably focused in what it is that they do that they even turn their back on their family and friends.
Okay.
Because there's no way, I don't know if you know like wrestling. You know wrestling? Ric Flair?
Yes.
Okay. Ric Flair, like I know, because I saw this recently. Hulk Hogan did a thing prior to passing where he said the reason why this guy was one of the, like Hulk Hogan thought he was the best that was ever in the industry. And he was like, and it was because he abandoned his family.
Yeah.
He was on the road year after year.
Yeah, it is
He was,
true.
and I would never want to be that person. I'm glad that we have someone like a Steve Jobs and some of these people who can move the needle literally on humanity or an
Yes.
entire industry. I am not jealous. I would never want to be those people for a second, because then my relationship with my kids is number one. Like if there's anyone I care about or any way to get an emotional response out of me, it's always through them.
Yeah.
Period. I don't care about really anyone outside of that. Like it's just them, and then everybody else comes after that. And I love that. That's what fulfills me. And like I can be very passionate about what I do. And you are such a family person too. Like you care about your family, you care about your friends. I mean, we're just talking yesterday. Didn't you just say you have like a foreign
I have an
exchange
exchange student.
Let's give a shout out to your exchange student.
Hi, Jonas from Germany. Jonas from Germany. He's in 11th grade.
Germany.
He arrived 2 weeks ago, and he's so amazing. He's the kindest soul. They're very far ahead of us schooling wise.
Yeah.
Very, very. And it doesn't count. He has to stay back. But he's wise beyond his years. I said, you're staying back and not going to graduate with your friends.
Yeah.
And he said, I will work my entire life, but I only have one opportunity for this experience.
He's not wrong. Like doing things like studying abroad, even in college, you know, it's a tough decision because you will never get an opportunity to like live somewhere for 6 or 12 months that just as part of your education process. I mean, it's, you know, it's not something that most people can ever experience. So that's really how's the experience been for you?
Awesome.
Yeah.
But that's another reason why I left too, is, you know, pediatrics is nights and weekends.
Mhm.
It's part of our ACO contract with Mass Health.
Yeah.
You have to be open so many hours after 5. You have to have so many hours on the weekend. X number of those hours have to be in person.
Right.
So that just, and then being open 365 days a year is just, it's a lot. So as Garrett got older and into soccer,
wow.
and just,
it's so interesting. And that's great. Like, you know, you wouldn't be able to do things like what you're doing right now. And I think, I mean, I personally think that that's much more important. Being good with your, you know, being a inspiration to strangers is always been less important to me than being an inspiration to my friends and family. And I think you've been there. Like I said, we're going to close this out because we're going to get kicked out of here in a second. But I think just personally, you know, I think that you've inspired way more people than you clearly realize. And that stuff is so worth dividends. You have so, I mean, like even just me reaching out to you and you doing this.
Yeah.
You're not in healthcare anymore. You don't have to do this. Why are you here?
Because I love you, Tim.
There you go. Because, and like, so you're there for the people who you're connected to.
Yeah.
And that's an admirable quality that not everybody has. So anyway, thank you very much. Okay, I think next week we have, do you know Dr. Siva?
No.
He's up on the North Shore. He has really interesting practice. He does some work over at, oh God, I'm not going to say the hospital because I'm going to probably get it wrong. Might be Anna Jakes. I think he like is a CMO over there. He runs his own practice.
Wow.
And he's looking to get into other things like, I think like sniffs type of work. So he must have an older population.
Wow.
I have a lot of research to do before I go up there. But he's just seems to be gangbusters in what he is passionate about. So that's where we should be next week, somewhere on the North Shore. So we'll see you at the next one, guys. Thank you very much, Kim, again.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
All right. And now let's play our awesome outro.